So my discussion this evening, it was it came from the discussion I had with my friend, but obviously it's a Christadelphian friend, biblical, and yeah, and it's fascinating. We living in the interesting times, and if you're looking forward to something, you will always come up with an answer. If you live your life carelessly, you will also bear the consequences. So I will start off by reading from Matthew chapter 12. And this is where Jesus was talking to the Pharisees, and they were asking for signs, and his response is actually our departure point for the discussion. So in the NIV, it says the sign of Jonah. Then some of the Pharisees and teachers of the law said to him, "Teacher, we want to see a sign from you." Verse 39, he answered, and this is the core of this discussion. "A wicked man, adulterous generation asks for a sign, but none will be given it except the sign of the prophet Jonah. For as Jonah was 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of a huge fish, so the Son of Man will be 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth. The men of Nineveh will stand up at the judgment with this generation and condemn it." Also, let's keep that at the back of our minds. For they repented at the preaching of Jonah, and now something greater than Jonah is here. The Queen of the South will rise at the judgment with this generation and condemn it. Again, let's keep that. There is now 2 people that are mentioned. For she came from the end of the earth to listen to Solomon's wisdom, and now something greater than Solomon is here. When an impure spirit comes out of a person, it goes through arid places seeking rest and does not find it. Then it says, "I will return to the house I left." When it arrives, it finds the house unoccupied, swept clean, and put in order. Then it goes and takes with it 7 other spirits more wicked than itself, and they go in and live there. And the final condition of that person is worse than the first. This is how it will be with this wicked generation. Very interesting, very fascinating. So Jesus answered, "An evil and adulterous generation seeks for the sign, but no sign will be given to it except the sign of the prophet of Jonah." And then the story goes on. Now, as things stand now, the Bible has never been so accessible. Technology has never been this accommodating. So the question is, miracle or providence? Now, you might have seen this statement because a friend of mine sent it to me, and that's what prompted the discussion. So now I want us to look at a few examples where we will look at the differences between miracle and providence. And there are so many benefits for us to understand this. And as part of our growing or growth, we need to be aware of our surroundings and what is happening. Now, I will read you another portion in John 2. This is where Jesus and his mother were at a wedding, and wine ran off. It was finished. And now they were stuck. They didn't know what to do. And I'll just take it up from verse 6 of John 2. Nearby stood 6 stone water jars, the kind used by Jews for ceremonial washing, each holding from 20 to 30 gallons. Jesus said to the servants, "Fill the jars with water." So they filled them to the brim. Then he told them, "Now draw some out and take it to the master of the banquet." They did so. And the master of the banquet tasted the water that had been turned into wine. Underline that. Water turned into wine. He did not realize where it had come from, though the servants who had drawn the water knew. Then he called the bridegroom aside and said, "Everyone brings out the choice wine first, and then the cheaper wine after the guests have had too much to drink. But you have saved the best till now." What Jesus did here in Cana of Galilee, verse 11, was the first of the signs through which revealed his glory, and his disciples believed in him. Similar to Matthew 12, we are told of Jonah went to Nineveh, and then Jesus gives the examples that the queen of the south, the people of Nineveh, they believed, and the existing generation was actually worse. They would have been condemned compared to the people of Nineveh. So if we look at what Jesus did, Jesus turning water into wine was outside of God's ordinary process. It was supernatural. This is a miracle. And this portion that I just read now, I picked it up from another commentary when I was doing this research. Now, what is providence? Let's look at one or two examples. Wine is produced from grapes going through a natural process of fermentation. And this process is designed by God and is controlled by God. This is providence. Now, of course, people like you and me wrote the process down, but obviously, if it wasn't God's will, this kind of wisdom wouldn't have been given to them to actually be able to map the process out to get to where to control or do produce wine. So sometimes we cannot differentiate the two. What is providence? There's some instances that are very clear, and there are some that are ambiguous. We sometimes call providence a miracle, and maybe more or less a miracle to providence. Another example is creation process of God, which we all know. And one commentary said, the metamorphosis of a caterpillar into a butterfly is a fascinating process, but it is not a miracle. From the very beginning of creation, God designed a butterfly to evolve from a caterpillar. That metamorphosis is an expression of God's providence. Now, this is interesting. Sometimes we look at these things and we think that was a miracle. Are we wrong? Not really. Does it help to delve into the detail and explanation and better understanding? Yes, because it helps us to thank God more and to be grateful in our daily living. Now, on the same breath, I want us to look at, you don't have to turn there. Genesis 21 talks about the birth of Isaac. Now, the birth of Isaac, as we all know, Abraham and Sarah did not have kids at a very late age. And in Genesis 17, verse 17, we read, this is when Abraham was told that he is going to have a son. Abraham fell face down. He laughed and said to himself, will a son be born to a man 100 years old? Will Sarah bear a child at the age of 90? We can see this is an abnormal situation. And likewise, Genesis 18, verse 20, so Sarah laughed to herself. This is after she heard that she's going to have a child. So Sarah laughed to herself as she thought, after I'm worn out and my Lord is old, will I now have this pleasure? Now, I want to pause for a moment where I want to get your, not your opinions. How do you see this? So the birth of Isaac, miracle or providence? What do you say? I can give a few minutes just for us to go through it, if you don't mind. Any comments? Did I catch you off guard?
I think it's both.
Why do you say that?
Okay, so it's providence because God promised Abraham an offspring, and he promised him descendants more than the stars in the sky and the sand on the earth, whatever. Sorry. And then it is a miracle because Sarah was barren. She couldn't have children up till the age of 99. And then God sent the name-bearing angel to basically bring them tidings that she will then have a son by the next time that angel would come and visit. And then so be it. So I think it is both. It is both providence and a miracle at the same time.
Look, well, I agree with you. That was my thought, because the system would have, at 100 years, the system would have probably like closed, as we know now. But it was a miracle that they had Isaac at that age, and providence that we know the process of having a child. When a man and a woman meet, they will create a child. Is there anybody with a different thinking opinion?
Yeah, I would also feel like Michael said, that you can put both those options, a case forward for both. But maybe at the end of the class we'll speak a bit more about providence, why it's so important to understand that and look for it in our own lives and so on. But for example, at the time when Isaac died, it was very sad for the family, but in a way it was broader, in the broader plan of God's provision for what was going to happen, especially in Jacob's life in the future. That whole issue there forced him and his mother to, force the issue of wanting the birthright and deceiving him when he gave the blessings and so on. And then when you look back later, I wouldn't call it a miracle by the normal definition of a miracle, but it's good to know that everything in our lives, we can either, at the time, we should see it if we take the right decisions from there on. It's the way God is setting us up for a good future.
Okay, so we've got a clear definition of a miracle. It's outside God's ordinary process, right? That's a miracle. I mean, turning water into wine, that's unheard of. And it happened. That's a miracle. So providence, I looked at the meaning and from a biblical point of view as well. So providence literally means foresight, but is generally used to denote God's preserving and governing all things by means of second causes. I don't know whether, Brother Lucas, you wanted to go into this, but there's one or two verses that will support that. Psalm 18, verse 35, and it reads, "You have given me your hand, your shield of salvation." We can see there's a second cause there, that shield of salvation. Then it also goes on to say, "Your right hand upholds me." So there is me, and then there is God's hand in terms of providing that hand to uphold me. Also goes on to say, "Your gentleness exalts me." So here we can see God is providing, is enabling these enhancements, which becomes it's a gift, and it would qualify to be providence, and we can always discuss about that. So back to Abraham, Genesis 15 verses 6 to 8. This is now when God provided, and when he gave him the covenant, he made a covenant with him. And verse 5 reads, "And the Lord took him outside and said, 'Now look to the heavens and count the stars, if you are able, Then he told him, so shall your offspring be. Already we can see here. Now, the most important thing is Abraham believed the Lord and it was credited to him as righteous. And I will explain why I'm talking about belief, because we read in John 2 when Jesus performed this miracle. Now, the Abraham situation is providence to me. The water to wine is a miracle, but both had were converging or were for the same purpose. The apostles, when they saw what Jesus had done, the disciples believed in him. And here we are seeing God is making a covenant, even though it's not fulfilled, but what God says, because of Abraham's understanding, he believed and it was credited to him. To him, it was a done deal. So it should be to us. And then it goes on to say, the Lord also told him, I'm the Lord who brought you out of the Chaldeans to give you the land to possess. So there is kind of a qualifying criteria. You need to believe and you need to understand. Now, in John 4, verse 4, James 4, verse 4, it's giving us an opposite now of believing. And this is James. He says, you adulterous people, do you not know that friendship with the world is enmity with God? Therefore, whoever wishes to be a friend of the world makes himself an enemy of God. This is from one extreme of believing and trusting and obeying that what I'm doing is right and God is right. James here is saying to the people, if you don't believe, if you are ungodly, then you will be an enemy of God. So here is the likeness. Mark 8, verse 38. Also, Jesus, when he was talking to the Pharisees, for whoever is ashamed of me and of my words in this adulterous and sinful generation, of him will the Son of Man also be ashamed when he comes in the glory of his Father with the holy angels. Again, like I said, there is a qualifying criteria, but now, whether it's a miracle or providence, we got to believe, we got to repent, like the example of Jonah in John, which we read. Now, again, in John 3, verse 16, we know it very well. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believes, in, again, that word believe is coming in as one of the prominent words in terms of the criteria. So like I mentioned, providence or miracle happens to glorify God. Luke 2, verse 20, it reads, the shepherds went back, glorifying and praising God for all they had had. This is after they had seen the wise men, just as they had been told. Still in Luke, we hear of the healing of the sick. And why was it happening? Luke 5 verse 25. Immediately, the man that was sick, he got up before them. He picked up what he had been lying on and went home glorifying God. So the long and short, we can see providence, miracles, criteria of believing, repenting, and following, and then the purpose of the glory of God. So in closing, I want to close with a question, and we can and we'll open up the class for discussion. Does miracles still happen today?